All right, we're back, and today's episode is brought to you by Manscaped. Manscaped is now selling beard products. That's right, they've gone from waist to face to help you replace that bulky razor with their brand new Beard Hedger Pro Kit. Let Manscaped help you get the golden rod of a Greek god. And now they've created the best tools for you to turn heads with a clean, perfectly groomed, and conditioned beard. Finally, tame your mane. Get 20% off and free shipping with the code WITHCG, WITHCG at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com and use the code WITHCG. You won't regret using the Manscaped Beard Hedger Pro Kit, the premier solution to face grooming. On to the episode, baby. Let's go. All right, we're back on the podcast, and I've been so excited to have this beauty on the airways with me today. He's a Chicago-based writer, podcaster, and recording artist behind the New Mindset Who Dis podcast, where he shares practical thoughts on self-improvement, mindfulness, relationships and dating advice, and most importantly, how to live your best life. Case Kenny. Case, welcome onto the podcast.
Hello, man. Thanks for having me.
So happy to have you on, man. How's things been? You're in Miami right now, right?
I am. Yeah, it's been really good. I mean, I'm from Chicago. I went to school in the Midwest. I'm 34. I spent the last 12 years in Chicago, and then kind of on a whim decided to move down here with my girlfriend. So it's been I don't want to say life changing or anything like that, but it is crazy how much like the sun and just like the water can change things. So I'm pretty content.
Yeah, it's nice to escape the Chicago cold weather, and now you kind of you know how it is with Cali weather now. It's kind of similar what you're dealing with. So.
Yeah. Cali maybe is the next stop.
Can't wait to have you. So let's get right into it, man. I want to talk about your story and jump into different topics of dating, relationships, manifestation, all that kind of stuff. So I really want you to bring me into, what kind of started you out with what you're doing with your dream and passion. You started your podcast in 2018. You have this idea. You've had a lot of success doing it. Take me from the beginning all the way up until present time. Would love to know, how you got into what you're doing.
Yeah. So, I mean, I started the podcast from a pretty genuine place, a compassionately self-serving place. So like I was, when I was 28, 2018, I was 28. And I started the podcast basically just in response to my life, right? In response to, I was working, very aggressively and very, defined my identity by my job. I was running a sales team in Chicago, selling ad tech, traveling a lot, 2 times a week. I had also at that time just gotten out of a relationship. So all things considered, I was just like, man, it would really suck if I looked back in 20 years and I realized that I was doing things that weren't true to me. I was setting goals that I didn't really care to succeed at, but I set them anyway. I dated people I didn't really find a connection with. I worked a job that didn't really fulfill me. I was like, that would really suck. So in that moment, I was really motivated by this idea of regret, that I could look back one day and regret these things that I could never change. And I'm a pretty type A person. So I was like, man, I really want to get serious. You can call it a quarter life crisis if you want. But basically, I was like, I just want to make sure that I'm not doing things that aren't true to me. So in true, 2023 form, I was like, let me start a podcast. At the time, not everyone was podcasting, and don't get me wrong, I love everyone who podcasts. But at the time, I saw it as kind of like a vulnerable medium because I could write. I had been writing online for a while on various topics, but I was like, let me hop behind the mic, let me get real and ask myself these questions and give myself these thoughts. Let me make my thoughts real. Let me speak them out loud. And that was basically the start of it. And then I realized through that process what I was doing, which was practicing mindfulness. And then basically I just kept pulling on that thread of interest and passion. And, I always say every time I do an episode, it's like a, therapy session with myself. And I've done it 467 times. So I've grown so much through the process. And then, as life would have it, you get good at something. You do it in a way that's somewhat unique. Other people start to notice, other people are drawn to it because of the relatability, because of the brand. And then eventually, long story short, I quit my job, wrote a bunch of books, created some products, started being known as, the journal guy, started doing a lot of music. And I'm still going. I think you asked me that same question in 4 years, I might have a different, path from here. But basically really started from a genuine place of me wanting to answer these questions for myself, and doing it via podcasts, and kind of the rest is history.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you made a huge impact on people in the world. I mean, helping them, become the healthiest version of themselves, but also kind of guiding them in the right direction through relationships too, with your own life experiences. It's huge,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I mean, it's the biggest privilege to do what I do. I mean, I
Right.
joke that I share my feelings for a living because it's kind of tough to describe exactly what I do because I'm privileged to do a lot of different things. But,
Yeah.
you know, at the end of the day, you know, it's a great feeling, of course, to get people to say, Case, you changed my life, or Case, you saved my life. I've gotten some crazy messages. And I take those in stride because, again, I'm just a guy. I don't have the answers, but I like getting messages like that in particular, not necessarily for me and what I'm good at, but more
Right.
so for what it represents. Because the reason that I really am attracted to mindfulness and logical mindfulness, talking yourself through these things, is it really shows you that we've got ourselves, we've got our back, we have the answers in here, and
Right.
we just need to figure out how the heck to tap into them. Like my favorite kind of message that I get, and I'm privileged to get it quite frequently, is from therapists, people who have gone to school, who are licensed professionals, who do this for a living. And they reach out to me and they say, Case, like, I really liked your podcast today. What you said is actually rooted in this idea or this theory or this study. It's really cool how you brought it to life in a regular way. And I get that all the time. And I think it's just a testament that average, normal people, even people with an aversion to sensitivity, vulnerability, self-help, we could find these answers that the professionals would talk to you about in therapy. And it just goes to show you that we could find these answers in ourselves. Even if you consider yourself the most anti-self-help, anti-spiritual kind of person, you have these things inside of you. And I just love those kinds of messages because it's bigger than me. We could all look inside ourselves and practice mindfulness to come up with these answers, which I think is just the dopest thing in the world.
I love that. Yeah, it's funny. I mean, to have therapists reach out to you for advice, comfort, and help with guidance of like how they could practice, what they can do to help people. It's incredible. But I think that's the biggest thing, Case, is that for me, I'm focusing more on mental health, and I want to help people with my own journey, but with other people's experiences too, like with yourself, right? And you've done a hell of a job helping people. And I think what keeps you going probably is the messages you get, right? People giving you feedback on how you changed their lives. That's the biggest thing, isn't it?
I'd say it's half the battle, honestly. Like, I'm not kidding when I say I do the podcast for myself. Like, it started from that place, and like,
Okay.
you can't help but grow when you do this twice a week for 5 years.
Right.
It's impossible. So
Right.
like, I feel like I have just grown so much as a person. So even if people stopped reaching out to me and my listenership plummeted, I would still do it because it's so
Right.
valuable for me. And then to your point, of course, it is the most rewarding, purpose driven thing in the world to get feedback from strangers on the internet that I changed their life. That's amazing. I mean, it's a gift.
Right. So what I want to move into is relationships and dating, and you cover a lot of that. In order for two people to have a healthy relationship to be successful together is for both of them to be whole and complete. Simple as that. Working on themselves. What have you seen in relationships where the biggest struggle is? What's the biggest thing that people are having a hard time with in their own relationships that you see?
Oh boy. I mean, everything. I mean,
Yeah.
so many things. I think, I don't know. I think recently, like, I talk a lot about the topic of understanding. I think is a big one. I think in order to have a healthy relationship, you need to have understanding between the two of you. And that's understanding within the context that, yeah, you want two people that are complete, but it could take a lifetime to be complete. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't date someone else. It doesn't mean you need to heal from, any trauma or a breakup. It doesn't mean you need to be completely healed. It doesn't mean you need to have a firm grasp on your attachment style issues. Like, I think those are things that you work through concurrently with the right
Right.
person. But I think the glue that helps keep you together while you're adjusting those things really is understanding. And I think sometimes we misconstrue what understanding is. I think a lot of times we think that understanding is about why. It's about being so close with your partner and you understand exactly why they are the way they are, why they're
Mhm.
reacting to life the way they are, why they're more emotional sensitive than you would guess.
Right.
That's like understanding 2.0. And I think that could take a long time in a relationship to get there. I think the thing that we need before we get that is understanding that. And
Right.
understanding that THAT, the fact that a relationship needs empathy at face value. That is, if your partner says, I feel this way, your words made me feel this way, the right person, and we need to push ourselves to do this, needs to say, okay, I don't understand why you're feeling that way. Frankly, I disagree that you should feel that way. I wouldn't feel that way, but I understand that you feel that way. I understand that your emotion, that your reaction is valid. If we don't have that, I don't think we can get to step two. And I think all those other issues that I just referenced get in the way. So I think the idea of understanding that versus understanding why is really important. I think a lot of relationships I see these days fall apart because we don't find people, or we don't push ourselves to offer that empathy at face value. And instead we need rationale. Why do you feel that way? Prove to me why that's valid. And I don't think it makes anyone a bad person necessarily to have that reaction, but we're very motivated by why. And I think early in a relationship, we just need that. And I know that's a very specific answer, but I've
I
been
agree.
seeing that a lot lately.
Yeah, I agree. It's not like being confused to be like, well, why, I don't understand. Why are you feeling that way? Like coming off like defensive. It's more the fact that people just want to be heard and understood.
Yeah, well said.
Just
Yes,
just listen.
yes,
Just
yes.
listen, right? And that's what I've learned in my experience with dating or being in relationships is like that's all they want is to just be listened to and comforted just to be listened to. That's it, right?
Yep.
And
Yeah.
it's you. Yeah, that's something that I think stands out a lot. I think triggers too, Case, come into play when people don't understand their triggers. Like for me, like the people I've dated have hit my triggers, vice versa. There has to be some type of safe relationship where we're protected by one another, where we can understand one another with our own triggers. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think triggers are so important to understand. I released an episode today on the idea of self-sabotage, kind of related to triggers, right? If we don't understand our triggers and we get triggered consciously, unconsciously, and we let our actions follow suit, we're going to self-sabotage a relationship. I think a lot of time about, you know, ambiguous things in a relationship, right? Like triggers can take many different forms and many different whys behind it. But for the most part, I think we're triggered by things that give us an emotional, visceral reaction because we're afraid of repeating something that happened in our past, right? A trigger comes from some kind of bad experience that we had, and
Right.
then we're triggered again to repeat it in the present. And you think about self-sabotaging behavior; those are behaviors that we do likely subconsciously in order to basically put an end to a relationship because we're afraid of something.
Right.
Um, and I think it really helps to get specific about that fear. You talk to any therapist and you ask them, why do we self sabotage? And they'll say, well, likely you're afraid, right? You're afraid of being rejected. You're being afraid of being hurt. You're afraid of losing your identity, for instance. And I think that's good, but I think it's helpful to get to the real bottom of it, which in my world, and I think a lot of people agree, is
Right.
what we're afraid of is we're afraid of a repeated experience. We're afraid of being hurt again. Fear, there are fears that are kind of ambiguous and not and are theoretical, right? Anxiety driven fears, but for the most part, fears come from past experiences. We lived through something that really sucked, that hurt us, that disappointed us, that rejected us, that treated us like shit. And now we're in a present and we don't want to repeat that. And that is our fear. And I just think it's really helpful in the context of triggers and just that kind of behavior to say, okay, I am afraid of being hurt again. That is where the fear is coming from. And I think when we can address it that way, we can get to the bottom of it and come up with some kind of evolving behavior versus saying, oh, no, it's just the way I am. I'm triggered by this. I'm afraid of this. How do we evolve through that? We have to say, okay, well, it's because of this, and I don't want to experience that again. Now we're getting specific, and we could do something about it.
Right. And you'll see the pattern in yourself with each relationship if you don't work on it. Right. And for me, like I've sabotaged some relationships. I'll be honest. I'll be open.
Yeah.
I've been triggered and it's that fear of the repetitiveness. I mean, I've been burned, I've been betrayed, man. I've been hurt. But the thing is, when you're going into a new relationship, they're not the same person. And you got to give that chance. You have to trust, and I've learned that. And the only way you can learn that and heal from it is if you do the one-on-one therapy. Simple as that, right?
What you said is just so spot on, and I think it's worth like highlighting because the thing about love, right? I'm not one for like really flowers and butterflies statements, but I also kind of am. So it's like if you think about love, like I did an episode a while back that I titled "Is Love Worth the Risk?" Like, is love worth the risk? Like, should we even bother trying to find love? And I would say yes, and I would say no. I would say no, it's not worth the risk if we live in a reality where we allow past chapters to define the present. That is, if someone hurt us in the past and we say, well, everyone will hurt me, or someone didn't think you were lovable, well, I am unlovable, or all men are pigs, or all women are gold diggers, right? Extreme hyperbole.
Right.
If we carry those past chapters into the present and we refuse to wipe the slate clean moving forward, then no, literally, practically, why would it be worth the risk? If we've already defined the limits of what is possible based on a previous chapter, no, why would we bother trying if we've already said it's not possible for me, or all people are like this? It wouldn't be practically, logically worth our time. It wouldn't be. Love is worth the risk, though, if you're willing to vulnerably, to what you just said, wipe the slate clean each time. And unfortunately, all that is a choice, right? All it is a choice to say, okay, that really fucking hurt. I don't want to be treated like that ever again, but I refuse to say that everyone else is like that, or I refuse to identify by the way that I was treated, or I refuse to say I deserve what I've been offered in the past. If you're willing to do that, then love is always worth the risk. Connection is always worth the risk, but we have to get to a place where we're willing to start over in a sense. So I always come back to that and, call that a optimistic, hopeful take. But I mean, it's just what you said. When you enter a new chapter, it's a chance for something different to happen. But we have to allow ourselves to believe that. Otherwise, we're just going to continue to repeat our past experiences.
100%. And that's why people's guards are up all the time. They don't want to let them down. They don't want to share their feelings and emotions either. It's too hard. It's too hard for them, I feel like. And you know what? I want to ask you a question though, man. So you said you have a girlfriend, you're dating someone. What is it that's keeping you guys just aligned and having a healthy relationship? What is it that you both are on the same page about? I want to share this so that people can understand like what's working for you.
Well, I won't harp on the understanding part. I think that's big for one, both levels of it. But two, I mean, I think there's a layer of practicality too. I think a lot about relationships is about timing, about where you both are headspace wise at the time, and that's not an answer that a lot of people like to hear because that's a variable that on their behalf you can't control. But I would say that's there, and also just patience. Like it was a slow moving relationship from the start, which I think was perfect. I think a lot of times we think about relationships and we think that, our person, our soulmate, it's going to be butterflies and fireworks from day one. And it's going to go so fast because finally someone who's on the same page and we understand each other and it's going to go fast. I don't think that's the case for the right type of relationship. I think the right love connection develops slowly because both of you are intentional in getting to know each other. I react a lot to like overt shows of affection early in relationships or love bombing. I think it's a huge red flag, not just because it's an overt way to like try to control someone's reciprocity towards you, but I think the right person is going to want to get to know you slowly so that your affection is returned organically to them, right? You're not forcing their hand by saying, I'm in love with you, you better love me back. So I think for us, it's just, there's all other things too, like aligned values, sense of humor, things like that, but it's also just patience.
Right.
Not rushing, not defining ourselves by that relationship status, but just patience combined with that understanding. And I think that's, served us really well. Just that pace, that centeredness along the way.
Right. I agree with you so much on the fact that don't rush sleeping with one another or being intimate. Take the time because it's like a flower. You want to blossom it. For me, my personal experience, when I've taken the time, maybe even like a month or two, whatever, the long amount of time of getting to know someone, that builds connection. That builds a lot of what you want to go into a relationship. And I think that not enough people do that. The people that just sleep with each other right away, you ruin it. You ruin it, I feel like, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead. Do you want to say something?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, I think there's, I think you can sleep on the first day and it doesn't really matter. All I know is that you never really know someone until 5 dates in. Like you really don't. Like every like I did an episode the other day that the beginning about how the beginning of a relationship is not real. And I said that in in a positive way. Everyone's on their best behavior for 1 date, 2 date, 3 date, 4 date. It's not real. It's not real, namely because you don't have the core defining factor of a relationship, which is conflict, which is drama. The only way you can know someone truly is how you interact when there's drama, when there's conflict. And I'm not talking about like fighting, but just differences of opinion, emotional honesty, like those. How do you respond in those moments? And you don't get that until 2 months in. You really don't. So I think that's such an important thing to look at. And I think patience plays a big role in that as well. And sleeping together or not sleeping together, I think that's an important variable as well. But I really think you truly don't know someone until you have a glimpse into that. How someone responds to the things that antagonize, the things that require a certain amount of depth that you just don't get in the beginning.
Right. And I think a part of it's regulating your emotions, right, through those times. And it's, that's what I learned too is that, you have to be able to be calm, cool, collected, and to look at your partner and say, hey, I love you. I don't want to do this right now. It's not worth it. Let's take time away. Let's think about how we feel. Let's come back together in a calm, cool manner, right? That's something I've learned because at times it wasn't like that in my relationship. So I think that's a good point.
Yeah.
And through the ups and downs case, is that how you've handled certain situations in your relationship where it's like, hey, I don't want to fight. It's not worth it. Let's not do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's exactly that. On the theme of patience, is like, all right, I feel this way. Take a step back. Let's evaluate how we can communicate this. Maybe not in the moment, but I think it's also my own work and our own work on our own too. I've done a couple episodes, and there's a lot of great literature on the idea of communication styles when it comes to how we respond to drama and conflict. There's a really well-known psychologist, Dr. Stephen Cartman, who talks about something called the drama triangle, which is how we are innately tuned and conditioned in adolescence and childhood to respond to drama in life. What do we do in those moments where we have conflicting ideologies or there's outright disagreement or conflict? We resort to different roles in the triangle, whether that's persecutor, we're blaming, whether that's rescuer, we're trying to fix, or whether that's the victim, or whether we're the victim. And a lot of that, of course, comes from childhood and adolescence and trauma and different things like that. But breaking into that is really what's helpful, so we don't go into robot reaction mode and self-sabotage a relationship just because we're so used to adopting a certain role or a hybrid of certain roles. It's challenging ourselves to break free of that.
Right. And when people take that role, they usually run away from their partner. They don't work through the ups and downs. Am I right?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say in pretty much every sense, it's a way of disassociating and adopting a role that places you in a certain tuning of behavior, whether that's saying, okay, it's all your fault, therefore I'm over here, you're over there, or whether that's rescuing, I'm over here and I need to fix that problem, or whether it's victimhood, I'm over here, whatever. So yeah, I mean, I think in any sense it is. And I think we all should strive, of course, to have a secure attachment style.
Right.
But in order to get to that point, you have to understand how you communicate, why you communicate, and the best course of action to maybe evolve through that and adopt a new form of communication.
Right. And the saddest thing to see would be, your partner working so hard on themselves and you run away because of your own stuff, the victim thing. I think that's a
Yeah.
huge, right?
Yeah, that makes me sad.
It's sad.
Frankly.
It's sad, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. But dude, attachment styles, man, I kind of wanted to dive into that stuff because I think everyone has their own type of attachment style, one way or another, right? I'd love to know, like, with you, what's been your type of attachment style? You're obviously in a secure one, I can tell. I mean, you look great, you look healthy, so what's it been for you? What's it been for you?
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, I'm pretty classic, dismissive, just, very independent, don't need it, kind of protect myself vibes. Definitely not, anxious in any sense, but more so just the dismissive independent type. Um, so I think that manifests in a lot of different ways, and I think for a lot of men that's a style that people men gravitate to. Just the idea of losing oneself, losing one's identity in a relationship, losing their independence, losing their masculinity, their purpose, their ability to be more and do more. I think that's a very relatable thing that manifests itself in these attachment style ways. For me, you know, moving to more of a secure attachment style, whatever you want to call it, it's been just understanding of like the purpose of a relationship. Like like you get to ask anyone and you get 100 different answers for what is the purpose of a relationship. I really look at it practically. I think the purpose of a relationship is to get more out of life. It is not to settle down. I hate that word because when I think about settling down, I think about less life. Sure, I think about a simple life, and I'm definitely after that, but I think about less less life, less travel, less adventure, less spontaneity, less randomness, less, crazy ideas. For me, the right partner, the right relationship empowers you to live more life, even like a less responsible life, because you have someone who's a ride or die, who's going to back you and you're going to back them, and you could do more together and you could do more on your own. There's a whole thing called the dependency paradox, which basically
Yep.
says the closer you are to a partner, the more independent you are. And that's because you think about, your relationship with a parent, for instance. When you're a toddler, if you're really close with your parent, they're going to have your back. So you're more willing to take a first step or do something crazy and stupid, because if you get hurt, they're going to be there for you. That's the dependency paradox. And it's a bad in some instances, but for the most part, I think about it in a good way. The closer you are to a partner, the more independence you have, and the more independence they should have. And when I think about it that way, it's easier to evolve to a secure attachment style, because you understand the purpose of a relationship. It's not to settle down. It's not to lose yourself. It's not to become this one, glob of human being. It's two whole human beings coming together to get more out of life collectively and individually.
Yep, I agree with you, and it sucks because it's with people's childhoods, it's out of their control. They could have a really shitty one where the parents weren't there for them, they were abusive, and but at the same time, that's where you got to heal and work on that. I'll tell you about mine. I've had an anxious attachment style, just from the experiences I've had. Like I said before, betrayal, being hurt, to where it was like I was so codependent on the girl. It was all about them.
Yeah.
Everything else didn't matter. I'm going to take care of them, and put all my time into it, but I always lived in fear. I lived in fear of being alone. What's she doing? What's going on? And it's like all that bullshit is just gone. I've done a lot of work on myself to where I've moved into a secure one. Understanding myself, it takes work,
Love that.
the therapy,
Yep.
and I'm vulnerable enough to tell people that because I want to help people, and it takes a lot of time and work, man. But I'm happy with where I'm at now, and I just want to help people understand that there are those different types of attachments, and we can heal and we can move into a secure one. One thing I want to bring up is loneliness. I think when people come out of breakups case, they tend to fill the void. They band-aid it by going to another person maybe weeks later or a month later. That's very unhealthy to do. I came out of a breakup and I was like, I'm going to take the time. I thought it would be okay to go jump into another thing, but it's not the right thing. And I think a lot of people do this stuff. What's your thoughts on all that?
I mean, loneliness is one of those topics that I talk a lot about. That it's tough to talk about, because when you're lonely, no advice is going to help you, and we make bad decisions when we're lonely, and they compound over time. So, I mean, I think objectively we could all agree that loneliness should not be a deciding factor when trying to date someone. Like, your objective of dating someone should not be to rid yourself of loneliness. That is an upside that comes organically, of course. But I think we need to back up, because loneliness obviously is pervasive outside of relationships. You could be with someone and feel extremely lonely. What does that mean? What does loneliness in general mean? I've done a couple episodes on this. I've written chapters on it. I come back to this quote from a woman named Martha Beck. She's a PhD. She's a Harvard-trained sociologist and author. And she has a quote that says, "Loneliness is a sign that your innate search for connection is still intact." And I've always been really inspired by that. And I spent a lot of time thinking about it. Loneliness is a sign that you're being honest with yourself, because you contrast that with what a lot of people do in life. A lot of people feel lonely because they don't have a partner, they don't have a job, friends, something that offers them contentment, connection, fulfillment, success, whatever, these adjectives that we're after. They feel lonely because they don't have that thing yet. So what a lot of people do is they just lower the bar. They say, okay, well, I'll just be with that person and then I won't be lonely, or I'll accept the suck and do this job, or this is good enough for me. And we lower the bar to get rid of loneliness, because of course we're very averse to it because it sucks. But I think the strongest thing you could do, the biggest sign that you're on the right path, is to say, okay, I feel lonely, but that means that I haven't lowered the bar. That means I'm still willing to hold out for the highest version of the thing that I'm going after. Very, very optimistic take on loneliness, but I really do see it as a sign that you're actually being honest with yourself, and you're not doing what a lot of people do, which is throw in the towel, lower the bar, accept good enough, and move on with their life. No one's a bad person for doing that, of course, but we do it because we're so averse to feeling lonely in the first place. And we need a quick fix. So we say, okay, I'll go on a date with you. Oh, 2 dates, 3 dates, marriage, great. Or I work this job, whatever it may be. I really do see loneliness as a sign of your highest level of honesty with yourself. And the longer you could sit in that feeling, the more likely I believe you are to finding that thing that rids you of loneliness forever instead of a band-aid fix or something that in 5 years you're going to be like, oh shit, that was not right. Now I'm back to
Right.
like lifelong loneliness compounded with regret. So to answer your question, yes, of course, like we shouldn't just go to be with someone because they're a warm body and they rid
Right.
ourselves of that loneliness. But like, let's get existential with it. Loneliness is a sign that your search for connection is intact. Connection, like your actual connection, not what someone else says connection, not what even I say is connection, but what you actually deem to be connection in life. And that's the way I look at it. And, we're all going to feel lonely. We absolutely are. But I think we really do need to realize that like loneliness is definitely a chapter. It could be a defining chapter, but it's not the final chapter as long as you're willing to sit in that feeling for as long as it takes. And I think then it's going to serve you in the long run.
Right. And I think it's important to heal from your last relationship, but it's the best time to outgrow the old version of you. To take the time to
Yeah.
have a relationship with yourself.
I
And
mean,
it
otherwise, how do you expect to do that? Like, you can't. If you're not willing to sit in that feeling,
yeah.
you are literally dragging 1.0 along the way where you deserve to be 2.0, 3.0, 4.0. Like, I think that I write a lot of like silly little quotes on Instagram, and I like the word reinvent a lot. I love that word because, I think the biggest gift we can give ourselves in life is starting over, is reinventing ourselves. But you think about language and you think about our human psychology, we are wired to think that starting over means massive failure. We think that starting over means we messed up so bad that we got to go all the way back to zero and start over. And practically, yeah, in some senses, you are starting over on like a timeline wise, but we're never like, there's that quote that's all over the internet that like, you're never starting from scratch. You're always starting from experience. Like, we need to freaking embrace that fact. We really do.
Oh yeah.
I always say, starting over isn't about what you're leaving behind. It's about what you're bringing with you. We need to take freaking inventory of what we're bringing with you, us, you, me. Like, we're bringing with us, things like standards, boundaries, lessons, understanding of ourselves. But
Right.
we really do need to be proud of that fact, like, because we really are bringing a lot with us. And as much as it might hurt to have to start over, because no one wants to start over, but as much as it might hurt to do that, you're bringing with you these things that hopefully will be the last time you do it. And you find that thing that is forever, all because you're willing to start over. And you're seeing the fact that starting over means you're getting closer to what you want, not further away from it, because it's about what you're bringing with you, not what you're leaving behind. And I know these are just words and they sound nice and they're all poetic, but I really do think that reframing of inventory, of leaving behind past chapter, current chapter, future chapter, bringing with us what exactly we are, I really do think that could be helpful to just give us the incentive so our actions follow suit.
100% on that. And you can't force it. People force going into something new, and it's like, take your fucking time, for Christ's sakes. It's like, come on. I wanna bring up something. We already talked about the messages you get. I really want to know what's the biggest one message that stands out to you the most from someone where you're like, fuck, that hit me. That was awesome. That felt good.
Yeah, there's one that someone sent me once, and it was just a quote from, well, I'll say two. One quote was that this person said, the difference between a head full of regret and a head full of memories is your ability to forgive yourself. And that just hit me like a friggin' freight train. Beautiful
Mm.
way of describing, self-forgiveness in life, which is very in line with what we're talking about here. And then totally unprompted, someone the other month, I was just finishing up my book, That's Bold of You, which is basically a book about unlearning and then, reinventing yourself. And they sent me a text that said, lightning in a bottle should never be taken for granted. And again, very poetic, very beautiful. But I went back and like rewrote some of the book because I was just so struck by this idea of capacity and potential and self-belief, and the way that we're so quick to take the simple things for granted in our life, namely our abilities and our ability to actually do things, as simple as that sounds. I was just so struck by that. Frankly, a lot of that was like why I moved to Miami. I was like, I'm capable of doing it. I have the ability to do it. Why am I taking that ability for granted? So I'd say between the two of those things, self-forgiveness and then the ability to decide tomorrow that you could take a new action, a different action, a simpler action, whatever it may be, I think is just such a amazing privilege that we all, for the most part, possess. Really inspired by those messages.
Love that. Love that message because it's so true. I think people have fear of the outcome or what people will think, or should I do it? Am I going to fail? No. And I think you're a prime example of that, man. Look how far you've come with your own podcast and all the stuff you're doing, being an author too. It's fucking huge. I'm proud of you for that, bro. You know, it
Well,
has,
thank you, man.
yeah, of course, brother. Listen, manifestation's a big one. This is the last one I want to bring up. And it kind of goes into what you just said. I think manifesting where you want to be with your own life, passions, goals, and relationships can really help you guide yourself in the right direction. You know, you want to live in the present, but it's good to manifest. What's your thoughts on all that? I feel like you're huge on it.
I am huge. I wrote a whole book on it. I called it "The First Inner Peace." Yeah, I mean, I think for the most part, I always have had and still have a bit of a aversion to the word manifest because it's taken such a hold in popular culture on people like, oh, I wake up in the morning, I drink my coffee, I manifest, and then whatever. That's great. Love it. Love it, love it, love it. We have to define what manifesting actually is. All manifesting is a form of intention setting that is a catalyst for actions, right? We have to have actions follow suit. But with that being said, I do think a lot about the words we use and the stories we tell ourselves. That is materially mental manifestation. And it's just a simple acknowledgement that if we are telling ourselves one thing in our heads, if we're describing our reality in one way, and it's in the form of all men are dishonest, all women are crazy, I'm an unlucky person, no one recognizes talent in life, right? If we're telling ourselves that story, and then we've set a goal of I want to be a famous musician or I want to find my soulmate, those two things do not coexist. They can't logically. How do you expect to describe reality in your head one way, but then go out and expect it to be a complete 180? Life just doesn't work that way. And I'm not particularly, spiritual or believe in karma and things like that, but I just don't see how those two things work in our heads. So manifesting in whatever way we define it, visualizing, whatever, we have to align those stories. Manifesting in my world is bringing those stories closer together. That is the story you tell yourself and the goal that you've set for yourself. They have to be one and the same. Otherwise, I don't see how your actions are going to follow suit. And it's along the same idea of, don't think of a yellow car, think of a yellow car, spot a yellow car. You're going to be much more likely to do so. We have to tell ourselves a story that is aligned with the reality we want. Specifically, practically, we have to tell ourselves what we deserve rather than just continuing to reinforce and tell ourselves stories of past failures, the ways that we've been mistreated, so on and so forth. Maybe just call that mentally training your optimism. But when I think about the topic of manifesting, visualizing, vision planning, we have to tell ourselves the story that we want to align with the reality that we're working towards. Otherwise, it just doesn't work. So that's my whole take on it. And I think I wrote the book, but first inner peace. Inner peace is getting to that place where we have the past, which was hurtful, but we have the present where we're telling ourselves of what we've learned and what we deserve. And then we have the future that is where those redeeming outcomes lie. We have to find a way to merge those together as opposed to having 1, 2, 3, or just completely divergent stories versus reality. So that's my rambling way that I think about it. It's just kind of rooted in logic.
Right. I agree with you. And I think a lot of people just talk themselves out of it. They don't think they're good enough. And that's the biggest problem. Sometimes you got to look in the mirror and say, I can fucking do it. I'm going to do it no matter what, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know what I mean? It's huge. And you know what, Case, I'm going to be honest with you, man. I manifested getting you on my podcast. Look where we are.
Hell
we're,
yeah,
we're here, brother. Let's fucking go. Yeah. So, hey, listen, I want you to be able to shout out where my listeners can find you, find your podcast, your journal, and other things. Could you do that for me?
Yeah, twist my arm. Yeah, I really don't like to promote myself very much.
Yeah. How could you?
Yeah,
How
of course,
could you?
man. I appreciate you having me on. I do love chatting. Yeah, I mean, case.kenny on Instagram. The podcast is called New Mindset Who Dis, newmindsetwhodis.com, or you could just throw my name or that into Amazon or Google, and I won't shut up about those things. So it's pretty easy to find me. Just search for New Mindset, Case Kenny, any variety of that, or social. Obviously, I'm always promoting things there.
Yeah, man. Well, I mean, it's huge what you're doing, and yeah, I mean, I've listened to your podcast. It's a hell of a podcast, and it's soothing too. You got a great voice. You're sending a good message to people, and I think they can really leverage you, man, and you can help them, and you've helped so many people. In conclusion, I want to say thank you, man. I think a lot of people need you, and they have you, and you're a blessing to their lives, and you're a blessing to me too. And I'm happy that we can resonate and relate with other people that listen to us, so we can help them with mental health and other things that we really need to focus on. So, hey, next time you're in Cali, You better hit me up. We better hang out and get some dinner and show you around
Definitely.
OC. I'll show you around OC. You haven't
Yeah,
been
man.
around here, man.
Please, please. I need someone who's got the hookup. But I appreciate that, man. And yeah, I mean, likewise to you. I mean, being mission focused and giving back and sharing perspective, I really do think is a purpose that we can all step into. So I admire you for that. So kudos to you.
Absolutely, bro. Well, have a great day and let's stay in touch.
Thank you, man.